Good morning, everyone, and good morning to everyone joining us live. I hope you've had your cup of coffee, your beverage of choice to get your day started. My name is St. Francis Tolang. I am the Corporate Affairs Director for Nestle in the East and Southern Africa region. My goodness, that's always a mouthful. And I have the pleasure of moderating what I believe is going to be a truly interesting, engaging conversation. Never mind that the room is not full to capacity. We do have a massive audience joining us online. So let's keep the conversation going. I look forward to engaging you here in person. And of course, to everyone joining us live, please do find a way of making sure that your questions reach us here. It's day 3 of the Extreme Hangout. I hear it's been fantastic. It's been great energy, and I'm hoping to get a bit of energy here in this room as well. We're outside. The setup is absolutely fantastic. Sea breeze, enjoying nature. I really think it's so refreshing, and I hope that the format of this discussion is going to be just as refreshing as the setup. Big food, big impact. That is the topic for today's session. It's a topic that I think we often shy away from the views of the panelists. And allow me to frame the conversation. As we know, big industries and particularly big food companies are oftentimes at the center of conversations and the climate change conversation for all the wrong reasons. The facts are compelling, they really are. The global food system in its current linear format has quite a significant impact on the environment. So the food system in itself is responsible for about 70% of biodiversity loss, generates between 21 to 37% of greenhouse gas emissions, and occupies about 50% of hospitable land. These are all facts. I think we cannot be denialists. I think the interesting spin on the conversation, and particularly why we're here, is to unpack the role of big food. Can it be a force for transformation? Can big food really be transformative? Can big food lead the way to regenerative food systems at scale? Can they? That's exactly what I'm going to be posing to the panelist. Dr. Agnes Kalibata, a woman that I really truly admire, president of AGRA, was quoted as saying, "The private sector has a possibility to create businesses that can change the trajectory of where our world is going." Do we agree? Is she right? Panelists, I hope you're ready to unpack that for me. But before I introduce the panelists, the World Benchmarking Alliance last year, I think some of you are aware, they introduced their first food and agriculture benchmark last year, ranking companies on how they're progressing on transforming food systems. Now, 2 of the top 3 ranked companies are represented on this panel. Thank you very much. Okay, that's more audible, and I can engage with the audience through eye contact. So 2 of the top 3 companies that were ranked are represented on this panel. The first panel member, Nada Nechim. I hope I said that right. I was really feeling anxious. So it's quite a tough one. Sustainability and Environment Executive at Danone Egypt. Rana Al Dusiki, I hope I also said that right, Sustainability Manager for Nestle Egypt. Unfortunately, one of our panelists is missing in action. I think I see her coming. I hope she is, but if she does, we'll be flexible. Juliet Grace Luedi, climate activist and community engagement for policy.org. She might make it here in time, but we look forward to welcoming her on the panel as well. And then finally, Hayley Campbell, Co-Executive Director for Care About Climate. Let me explain how today is going to work, right? Each of our panelists are going to have an opportunity to make their opening arguments. So in response to big food, big impact, the role of food companies and can they be transformative? So each of the panel members will then have an opportunity to make their opening arguments. And in that opening argument, they're going to frame what their tension point is. So, what is it that they would like to ultimately unpack and really have a robust and rich discussion? It's not a debate, it's a discussion, constructive discussion. So, we'll allow the panelists to then make their opening arguments. I will then help facilitate the conversation. I'm going to join them there, be comfortable. So, do enjoy this engaging conversation. Online, remember, you can pose your questions as well, and audience members, there will be a Q&A session to hear your thoughts and have some of your reflections and engagement as well. Let's get this panel discussion started. So we're going to start with Nada for her opening arguments. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Saint, for the warm introduction, and I'm very pleased to be part of this panel discussion amongst powerful youth leaders. As a sustainability kind of spokesperson, what I think is that we need to take a step backward before we assess our value chain and before we actually set our business processes. We need to think of the actual innovation and in the planning phase. So when you start planning, you need to think of how are you going to get the resources, since climate change is real, the science is there. So the resources in general are very scarce, and you need to be very ethical when you're retrieving that kind of resource. So when it comes to planning, you need to be very innovative in order for you to actually sustain a business and to protect the environment. Part of it is that you need to have several questions regarding how are you going to get the resources, where are you going to get it from, who's that behind that kind of resources, and afterwards you're going to use certain machines. Are those machines energy efficient or not? All of these kind of aspects, including logistics and transportation, is very important in the planning phase. And in my opinion, the sustainable innovation plays a huge role, complete huge role in that kind of phase before the value chain. So for example, in the Known Egypt, we've just won the MEA Golden Packaging Award, where we were awarded that we had provided the highest amount of yogurt in a cup with the smallest amount of packaging. And in that kind of innovation, we were able to reduce our CO2 emissions, we were able to proceed an economic value out of it, and be more like a sustainable kind of innovative way. So yeah, sustainable innovation.
There we have it. Sustainable innovation is the tension point. I'm going to allow the panel members to make their opening arguments, but it's well noted, sustainable innovation. I feel very passionately about this one, and I'd love to hear what that looks like in practice. What does sustainable innovation ultimately lead to in terms of the regenerative food systems at scale? So let's park that one. Nada, over to you.
Thank you, Saint, so much for having me today. So basically, the entire food system needs improvement, from the way we produce food to the way we consume it. Do you know that actually 1/3 of the food we consume is actually wasted? So I believe this is something that we need to put attention to. So I believe also that consumer demand is increasing and will keep increasing along with the population growth. By 2050, the population will reach 10 billion people, and still we will be overexploiting our natural resources more and more. Also, climate change has become an everyday reality for us, and that's why we're all here today trying to find solutions of how to solve this issue and for us and for the future generations, which is also leading to significant challenges on all the crops. As well, I believe that consumer awareness has changed, and consumers have become more and more aware, and they want options that are good for them, for the planet, and for the future. So I believe these could be our attention points.
Thank you so much, Nada. Rana, sorry. I think the food waste conversation is one, in my personal opinion, that's often overlooked. So I'd love to unpack that in terms of, I think I was having a conversation just shortly before the beginning of this panel discussion around food waste being a low-hanging fruit in the climate action endeavor. So let's park that. Tension point number 2 noted. Haley, over to you.
Thank you. Hello? Okay. Thank you so much for having me and for convening this panel, as well as to the panelists before me for sharing your attention points. And I think for me, a really big thing about food that's often missing is that we've, as consumers, have almost forgotten our connection to the food and how it really is sorting our lives and allowing us to be here today. We all had breakfast today, but we all probably don't know where our breakfast came from. I know that I don't, and I'm definitely guilty of this, and so many other people around the world are too. And that connection has been found to really help restore lifestyles, restore land, increase climate action, ambition, all these different things when we know more about where our food is coming from, knowing who it's impacting, how it's made, all those questions that you were asking in the first kind of tension point here. So I think for me the tension point is how are big companies, big food companies, sorting this connection back to our food systems in a way that allows us to fulfill our daily needs, especially as more people are transitioning to meatless diets and vegan diets to help protect the planet and animals, etc. But also how these big companies are still seeing sustainability not as a way forward on their bottom line to make money or to save money. It really needs to be people over profit, and I would love to see how big food companies are starting to think in these ways and prioritizing people and land over funding money.
That is our third tension point, and I think it's probably the tension point that is most burning, right? I see a lot of wide eyes in the audience. Let's delve into that, panelists. So Haley has put it to big food in terms of how the connection. I love that concept of connection, by the way, to the food, the value chain, and the entire food system. And ultimately, what does that look like for the end consumer, tucking into product, tucking into the food? So how are big companies navigating this? What can they do or should they do to make this connection clearer or more transparent, perhaps? I think we're delving into this concept or this theme of transparency. Who wants to take that first?
Okay, so I believe, for example, what we're doing in Nestle is we have regenerative agriculture practices. So in simple terms, what do we mean by regenerative agriculture practices? It's going back to nature, just simply put as this, because it sounds very sophisticated. However, it's just going back to nature, not trying to play around with what's happening with the soil, for example. Just leave things as they are without over exploiting our resources or doing anything to them. And that's what's basically what we're currently doing in Nestle. We have 3 pillars to regenerative agriculture, which are soil, biodiversity, and water. And we have the farmer at the center of this model, because at the end the farmer is the one who's responsible for everything. He's the decision maker, and he's the one who will at the end benefit from what's happening. Benefit or not benefit if it's like going bad.
Maybe I crossed it over to Haley in terms of, clearly that's an indication that big food companies are looking to be more transparent, really focusing on regenerative agriculture as an opportunity. Is there more that you expect big food companies to be doing? And what does that more look like? Frame it for us. Let us understand what that more is. Because I oftentimes believe that people expect more of big industry, big food. Frame that for us. What does more look like?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think if you ask any other different activist or advocate, they might tell you something different. And that's what's so special about our food systems, as they're connected to our cultures, our ways of being. What I'm eating where I grew up in Texas is not the same as where I'm living now in Hawaii. We have different food systems and different people behind those food systems. And so I think the more for me is focused on a couple of things. One is having those rights for workers and farmers. We know that if I go to buy a chocolate bar that is produced by Nestle, it costs me in the United States maybe $1 or $2. And I also know that almost none of the ingredients were probably made or produced or farmed in the United States. So I'm not really supporting anyone from my local economy. And we know that in Nestle, for example, a lot of the big markets are all in the global north. Yet a lot of the resources being extracted are coming from the global south. And that kind of shows that dichotomy between where things are produced and used versus where things are eaten and consumed and what becomes parts of people's culture, right? I grew up eating a chocolate bar, all the time, right? It's, to me, chocolate's part of my culture, even if I didn't grow up with a cacao farm in my backyard. So to me, I think the more is how are food companies really closing kind of this gap and ensuring that when they are doing these regenerative agriculture practices, they're also keeping in mind, the farmers, the communities, the land that's being, as you said, exploited as well, but pushing beyond that to say, well, we know land is being exploited, how, and people in that sense maybe being exploited as well. How are we pushing past that, and how are we showing that to consumers that when they're buying this chocolate bar, if I was a farmer, Haley from this farm in this place, grew this cacao, and here's what it means to them, and how are we taking those stories and bringing them along through all the food that we're eating if we are going to keep having a globalized food system.
Anyone want to respond to that?
I'd like to respond on that. Thank you, Haley, for that statement. In order for a company to be able to track its value chain, and it comes from the farmers, the positive thing about getting sheltered in a company is a certification, so a sustainability kind of certification. So in Danone Egypt, we have a B Corp certification where we're going beyond our financial profits to meet the highest social and environmental standards. And in this kind of certification, we have been evaluated our extreme entire value chain of from retrieving the resources to actually packaging it. So that kind of certification we were able to get recertified this year with an increase of 34% from an 81.6 to a 109.4 score. So that's a huge jump. And this score was able because of our impact business models. And one of our powerful impact business models is a project called Alben Baladna, which is a project that aims on promoting the economic welfare of farmers. And we've partnered and established a huge collaboration with 8,500 farmers and with the participation of 7,000 women that were able to collect actual raw milk, and this was able to secure up to 18% of our needs of raw fresh milk. So this is how we can collaborate and partner with our smallholder farmers, because we are locally getting our actual milk from Egypt. And this is how we are able to promote the economic status of the smallholder farmer. We were able to push the kind of business from that. And this is how we can sustain an actual economic value chain as well as a social and environmental kind of aspect. Thank you.
Rana, is there anything you'd like to build on to that?
So in Nestle as well, we have sustainable sourcing. We're sourcing 20%. We have a goal to source 20% of our key ingredients by 2025. For example, cocoa, sustainable sourcing by cocoa, coffee, palm oil. So as well, we're tracing from source everything, to make sure everything is sustainably sourced. So. And we as well have certifications for across the different, for example, Nespresso. We have a certification for Nespresso as well, sustainable sourcing, and from end to end.
So there's a hand that shot up in the audience that looked quite animated, and I'm quite interested to bring you in. So we're being flexible. We're breaking the flow a little bit, but I think it's quite intimate. We're hanging out, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much. My name is Natalie Kelly. I am on the board of Kiss the Ground. I am also the descendant of Inca farmers. So we were the first regenerative agriculturalists. So I really want to take a moment to expand your definition of regenerative agriculture. Working with nature is a start, but actually the definition of regenerative is leaving an ecosystem better than when you found it. And so in the case of my ancestors, the Incas and the incredible indigenous people of the Amazon, after humans intervened with their agricultural systems, there was more topsoil and there was more biodiversity. So I don't believe that it is fair for companies like Nestle and Danone to genuinely be able to use that term. And I think we have to really respect the people that came before us and were truly regenerative, and be careful to not use terms like this in order to sell products. I want to touch on the 3 pillars that Nestle mentioned, soil, biodiversity, and water. Nestle, as a supporter of GMO crops, has been one of the leading contributors to biodiversity loss in the world. So that means a loss of biodiversity, that means a loss of topsoil due to the support of big ag, in industrial methods of farming. And I won't, out of politeness, I won't go into the many scandals Nestle has faced over water. So how can you genuinely respond, genuinely touch on these three pillars, soil, biodiversity, and water, and say, and I'd like a response on how, knowing the controversy that Nestle has faced in the past, being responsible for problems in all these areas, what are the genuine efforts you're making to be able to be allowed to use a term like regenerative?
Thank you very much. Very pointed question. Yes, my mic is on. A very pointed question. Challenge that Nestle should not use and is, needs to earn the right to use the term regenerative agriculture. Rana, are you okay to take this one?
Yes, sure. So actually, we started working. It's a journey. So it's not just a one step, or you cannot do it alone. We're working with other companies like Danone, for example. They're doing similar efforts. It's a collaboration. We need to work with others. Need to join us. We need to work. Maybe we need to advocate more. We need to increase our scale. But it's a journey for us, and we're taking it. So we have a commitment as well by 2025. So we're not there yet, but we're working towards it.
Haley wants to respond to that. I think the interesting, this in itself, I think, is a tension point that we should unpack. The historical legacy issues, almost accounting for the direction that the company wants to take. And herein lies the tension point in terms of, should that be a hindrance in moving forward? If there's a journey that a company is taking future forward, looking at regenerative agriculture, should the past play its role? It's a tension point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Haley, I think you wanted to respond to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think kind of building off of what you said, and I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, I think it's a really, really important point, and kind of the essence of what a lot of the stuff that I work in is getting at is making sure that when we're using these types of terminology on regenerative, sustainability, agroecology is big at the UN right now. What is the meaning behind these terms, and are we using them just for the bottom line to make money at the end of the day, or are we using them in the real sense of the term to store biodiversity in communities and really see food systems as a way that we need them to live, but we really need to be protecting these lands and see them as kind of a way towards that future you're building without actually causing all these additional detriments and exploitation. And I'm going to, quick challenge, I don't really feel satisfied by that answer, so I don't know if you have anything else either of you would like to add, but I don't really think that that's touching on this point here about the fact that regenerative agriculture might not be the right term, and to that point, thinking about, sustainability and saying if there's a future with any economic footprint, right? Some activists might say their capitalism can't exist in these systems, right? And we've heard that in the news and we've seen that. And so I'm wondering, how can we store these lands, maybe at the expense of some financial income? Is that even something that we're considering, as that might be the best way forward for a lot of the food and ecosystems?
So actually, as part of our program, we're also providing incentives to the farmers, premiums, to help them, to encourage regenerative agriculture practices. So it's a journey at the end, and we're not there yet, but we're working towards it. So maybe.
I think the proof points therein, and I think you're right in saying that there's probably, I think, a disconnect between the communication thereof. So companies are certainly probably not even shouting at the loudest about some of the really fantastic foundational work that is going into regenerative agriculture. Should there be more communication, and who should those stakeholders be in terms of communicating these efforts? Is it to consumer, and if so, is that then for bottom line purposes, and that could be misconstrued as that? How is that communication and clarity on some of those efforts? How should that be managed, and who needs to be part of those conversations such that the wonderful work might not be enough, but the wonderful work that is being done is certainly being elevated and that awareness is created.
Thank you, Saint, for bringing that up. When you talk about marketing an entire product, it's already there. It's the consumers already know that we are B Corp certified, and making us the largest company in Africa and in the Middle East to actually have that kind of B Corp certification. So the certification of the entire company is there, but it's more of a governmental kind of aspect. I believe that we have actual targets to reach by 2030 goals, and we are in line with the country's sustainable development goals, and we are actually having so many partnerships and collaborations with the government. So the power aspect of that is the government. Consumers are going to consume. As long as there are food, they'll be able to consume. As long as there are shelves in the supermarket, they're just going to consume. It's the government that plays a role in that. And for companies like Danone Egypt would collaborate and partner with the government and push into a legislative kind of impactful law is what would going to be strive into a sustainable kind of pace. Consumers are probably going to be part of the footprint, but for us, it's the government. It's the legislations that we need to be implemented for us to proceed in a sustainable value chain. So yeah.
I think that's why we would need to work more on advocacy as part of our responsibility.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we need to be bringing all stakeholders to the table, including policy and all of these, farmers, consumers, waste companies. All these different people need to be at the table. But I think kind of shirking the responsibility onto politics and government, we know that, as a company, there are leaders in charge that can make decisions every day that don't necessarily require policy changes. It just requires maybe company-wide policy changes that seem difficult but are totally possible and doable. And I think that we can't just shirk the responsibility saying there's not enough policy or advocacy, because one, policy is really hard. I go into the negotiations as a young person trying to hear different parties' positions and trying to figure out how can we get small things in here and there over at COP27. And it's really, really hard and it's really confusing. And even then, usually the language is watered down and isn't really supportive of what you truly mean. So I don't think that it's just kind of putting responsibility on government and policy. I do think companies have the power to do more, but it's so easy to step back and see why we can't do something instead of creating those changes, stepping forward, transforming, and working with even indigenous communities, other farmers who have these truly regenerative practices to come in and work together and feel like they can maybe also have land back to store it and help produce for the global food needs, but also help produce for themselves and their communities, and have that type of language and work doesn't necessarily need policy. It just needs action from companies.
Action. I want to throw it back to either you, Nada, or Rana. Working for big food companies, you're probably aware that policies do exist, right? There is action. So how is it that we get to this point that more is being required? And I think that more question still remains for me. What does that more look like, right? I really think it's an interesting area to unpack in terms of what does more look like, because I think the appetite is there for big business. The appetite is there, and I think we need to be framing that more. And for me, it's a personal interest area. Knowing that those action is being taken, those policies at company level, many different policies, responsible sourcing, etc., is there. Where do you think the disconnect is?
I think there might be a lack of awareness maybe at different parts of the value chain. Maybe some people now are starting to become aware of it, but not everyone yet is there. So I believe if we go a step backwards, there was a time in the world where everyone was just cared about, like it was more of producing more, buying more, like at some point of time, like you buy more clothes on a daily basis, monthly basis, just an example of clothes, which wasn't the case years back, in older days. Now people are becoming more aware that this is not good for the environment, and everyone realized that climate change is a reality. No one used to believe that climate change is an actual thing if we go like 5 years ago. Actually, like just before COPs was announced to happen in Egypt, when we tell anyone climate change in Egypt as an example, no one believed. Like, what are you talking about? So people are still not aware that there's something happening or something is really happening to our planet. We only have one planet. Maybe people more and more are realizing what's happening because a lot of things around the world, floods, droughts, heat waves, everywhere, it's happening more often than before. So I think awareness is starting to increase, but we're not there yet. And I think it will happen eventually.
Anything you want to add?
I'd like to add that it's a part that it is an awareness kind of point of view, and it's a policy kind of point of view because just like Rona said, we're two big food companies and we both have targets that we need to reach by 2025, by 2030, and it has to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's no bluffing in that. So it's collaboration among all of the companies. The companies have a huge carbon footprint, and we need to be very transparent and we need to be very honest with ourselves and put everything on the table and say, we're doing that, are you in or are you out? It's a collaborative kind of partnership, and sure, I'm a company, I'm powerful, but I can be times 100 more powerful when I have other entities and other companies together aligned with the same goals that we're trying to achieve.
I think collaboration as well is not just across companies like the big ones. It has to be across all stages of the value chain. We all need to work together, and this is why we are all here today and for the coming days.
Collaboration, it is that's my own tension point, by the way. So I had a wild card coming in towards the end. So we've touched on collaboration. I think it is an important theme. I want to go back to your tension points. You mentioned innovation and the role of innovation in really driving impact, right? Big food, big impact. And specifically looking at how does innovation allow big food to drive that impact and really help transform regenerative food systems at scale. So let's talk about innovation and that role that it plays.
Innovation is huge, a part that I had a major in innovation itself, but what I'm trying to highlight is that apart that there's a technological innovation and there are huge machines that produce carbon emissions, and you head to an energy efficient kind of one. But that's technological innovation. But the kind of innovation that I'm trying to highlight and identify is the impact business models that we have. The one that I previously mentioned was Alban Baladna. And this was an innovative solution and has been in a huge key impact in our country. Apart with another impact business model is Al-Umda. Al-Umda is a project that we've launched back in 2011 that enabled entrepreneurs. We provided them financial support, and they were capable of purchasing equipped trucks, and then they can distribute that kind of the known products among 21,000 retailers. And that's how you can able to reach to 3.6 million consumers. That's how you can be very innovative. You've provided job opportunities, and you were able to reach to actual areas, urban and rural, that they have never received that kind of product. Especially our product is aiming on a healthier and happier Egypt. It's trying to eliminate malnutrition and hunger. So this is an important kind of innovative. You bring the people, you bring the locals, you put them in your value chain, and you build them an entrepreneurial kind of mindset. This is how you can become completely innovative in a way.
Yeah, innovation beyond just technology, and you're speaking to business models and different approaches. Rana, would you like to build on that in terms of how innovation can enable that transformation?
Of course, I believe as well the youth are very important on board on this journey, because youth as well have a lot of innovative ideas that can help us in building regenerative food systems. And as well, we have an initiative in Nestle, our Nestle Needs Youth Initiative. And part of this initiative is actually agripreneurship. and entrepreneurship. We have two pillars of this initiative which are related to what we're talking about. So entrepreneurship, people are encouraged to have ideas, and we help them from end to end to build their ideas and actually bring it to life. And agripreneurship is we're working with young farmers, because a lot of farmers in farming communities these days are moving out, and the farming communities are being grown by an aging population. So we're trying to we're working to help make farmers stay in their communities to ensure regenerative at the end regenerative agricultural practices. So everything is interlinked.
Yeah, and I guess innovation also speaks to collaboration and the need for that. Haley, what's your take on collaboration? What should it look like to enable this transformation, of course, with big food and all the different players within the food system?
Yeah, and I think these are really big questions that we're asking here. So there's probably a lot of different answers. And I can kind of touch on each of the points that you briefly mentioned. One, on technology, a lot of times, we want more efficient technologies. We want to do more with tech. But also tech is a big business too, and speaking and giving more funding and money back to people who are also part of these problems. When, for example, I said I live in Hawaii right now, there are 1 million people on the island that I live on Oahu, and we currently import 95% of all of our food, which is almost all of it, right? But back when it was just the Polynesians and Native Hawaiian community members, there was 1 million people living on the island, and they imported 0% of their food with the same exact populations, and people were healthy and happy, and the land was healthy and happy as well, from ridge to reefs. And so I think that when we're talking about tech, it's also important to be thinking about where can we scale back and return to those indigenous native practices that are better for the land and better for people as well. And then talking about youth, as a young person myself, right, I mentioned earlier, I've never had an interest in farming or any of these types of things. And I know that in Hawaii, for example, there's also a big issue where most of the farmers are becoming older, and a lot of the young people are not wanting to be farmers. They don't want to be in a food system. And I think that it's really important to have these educational pathways, but I think it's more important to reflect back on why don't young people want to be farmers? Why don't they want to continue to exploit the land in the ways that they've been, in a lot of senses, forced to, whether it's due to colonization or to other types of injustices around the world? And so I think that is really important to reflect on in terms of collaboration, is the who, the why, and the why on why these people might not want to be in the room. It's not just enough to say there's a young person here, there's a farmer here who's young. It's thinking about that wider system. And the last part I'll add on to my take on the collaboration innovation is when we're talking about local food, it's also about, to me, letting farmers lead. It's amazing to bring farmers in and to collaborate, but it's also amazing to bring in packaging companies, consumers, and also post-waste. I know we're getting to the waste one, but a lot of people, they get their chocolate bar, they get their coffee, they throw away the cup, or they throw away the remains of it, and no one has any idea what happens to it, right? It's probably out there floating in the Pacific Ocean along with the rest of the garbage, right? And I think those are all really important players that need to be in these conversations and trying to figure out how can we have these connected food systems that are also reflective of local and cultural needs and not adding additional harms to people, even if there are good intentions.
Powerful. I'm actually just digesting all of that. I think some really interesting nuggets there. In the interest of time, we probably are going to open up to audience or online. Mary, I don't know if we have anything online. But we've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd love to give this opportunity to get further questions or comments from the audience. While you warm up, there's a...
Yes, we have one question. If you could wave a magic wand and not have any restrictions, what do you feel Nestle could do to make the biggest impact and change?
Rana? I mean, I'm a moderator, right? So I'm trying not to be biased here. I've got many thoughts.
So I think there's a lot to do, but I believe as well, like I said earlier, we all need to work together. It's a journey that we need to do together. We cannot do it alone. So I think this is, I believe, the biggest thing that we need to start working on. Do you have anything to add, Saint?
I'm a moderator. I'm supposed to be impartial. Yeah, I'm going to remain impartial, actually. So tempting. Don't do that. All right. I think there was a question here as well.
Hello, everybody. I am from an initiative called the Plant-Based Treaty, and we are trying to encourage people, individuals, as well as governments to switch from animal-heavy food systems to plant-based food systems. And we have been talking about food products a lot, for example, the yogurt, and we know packaging and the distribution, they play a big role, but the biggest impact lies within the product itself. The biggest achievement we can make is if we change how we produce the product. Do we produce it with cow's milk or maybe like a plant-based milk? And of course, there is also a huge problem of violence in producing animal products. A slaughterhouse is not a beautiful place and will never be. So my question is, what is the role of animals in your idea of a plant-based, of a sustainable food system?
So for Nestle, we're working towards having alternatives to animals. We're looking into other alternatives, plant-based options. We're also looking for like switching things in the ingredients that could have like small change but big impact on the emissions and everything. So we're taking as well small actions, but they have big impact. They might seem small or you might not hear about, but they do have big impact.
For Danone, we have a product that's called Alpro. It's a plant-based product for vegans. But when we're focusing on animal welfare, we have an animal welfare roadmap till 2025. And this is no joke because we're handling a lot of farms in Egypt. So part of our internal assessment tool is a tool called Cool Farm Data Tool. That tool actually focuses on the animal aspect of the entire process. We focus on the livelihood of the animal. Is it abused or not? And we have internal audits and external audits every single year and semi-annually because of the animals. I'm an animal activist, so I'm ensuring that no cow, unless I'm still in Danone, Egypt, should be passed by any kind of torture. So this kind of Cool Farm Data tool is a huge tool that I'm able to monitor and strictly implement, not only in our farm, because it's a third largest farm in Egypt, but the smallholder farmers. It's up to the different small farmers, and the Egyptians that are handling those kind of farms, they don't have this kind of awareness. And it's extremely it's an argumentative kind of aspect, because a farmer in Egypt would focus on just a monetary kind of fund. They wouldn't focus on the animal right of its farm, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm with that. I'm completely against any farmer that would do such cruelty to an animal. So this is why this is my role, and in this firm, to protect the animals as well, and to promote and monitor this kind of assessment along all of the farms that we're handling in Egypt. Thank you.
Actually, Nada, we have something similar. We have the same technique in Nestle. We're using the Cool Farm tool, but we don't have any milk farms in Egypt. We have it in other parts of Middle East, like Morocco and Iran. And in South Africa, for example, and across other parts of the world. So we're doing similar efforts as well. So as well, collaboration amongst companies is very important. So collective effort as well. If we're all doing this, it will add up, I'm sure.
We are running out of time. I think I wanted to move on to closing arguments. I wrap up. I think there's so much that we still need to unpack. Big food, big impact. It is quite a, I see you. It is quite a big topic, and within an hour or so, so much we need to cover. In fact, we still haven't covered a tension point, which was food waste and the opportunity, low-hanging fruit that food waste can be, particularly in climate action.
We do have a couple of questions coming in online, if we can get them in quick.
Let's take 2 questions.
Oh, okay. How is an ambition of embracing 20% regenerative agriculture by 2025 a real ambition? We need to turn the world and the practices of big business around fast. An ambition of 80% plus feels more like an appropriate scale ambition. When will big business like yours take true and meaningful steps?
I think it's quite clear who that is directed to. So, Rana and Nada, if you could high-level, quick responses to that. While you think about that,
I'll think.
maybe let's take the second question.
Yeah, there's one here. From Thando. The use of chemicals for agriculture has a big impact on water pollution. What are the steps or actions taken to curb and reduce water pollution?
For agriculture. So we have many initiatives for water pollution. So actually in Egypt, as an example, we have a water factory. However, we're working on water regeneration as well. Also, we're recycling the wastewater to ensure circularity. What else? Farming practices as well. We're trying to reduce water usage in our factories. We're trying to reduce water usage to ensure, to limit water. What else do you have?
We have also as a point of sustainable agriculture kind of implementation, we're shifting pesticides. We actually have a roadmap that reaches to make organic instead of ditching the pesticides, and so similar practices such as no-tilling and the crop monoculture implementation. Especially in our firm, we don't have agricultural lands. We only have a farm, and we have our value chain with our smallholder farmers. But for us, there is a roadmap as a global Danone when it comes to sustainable agriculture. So no with the pesticides, more with the organic.
Okay, let's wrap it up. I think there was a question, particularly around. We're wrapping up. Thank you. There was a question, particularly around ambition and 20 versus 80. Should there be more? And perhaps, I don't know if there's just a slight reflection, one, response to that and it goes back to the more, right? Should big companies, big industries do more? Is 20% enough? What does that look like at scale? Can we move faster? I think these are all the questions that so many are grappling with in terms of that appetite is there, taking the responsibility and leadership is there from big companies. How do we move quicker? And I think if we had the answer to that, we would be moving faster. So I think it is an important reflection point to say, how can big industries move faster? Is it enough? And what does that more look like? I think it's really been the nexus of what we've been engaging and having a discussion on. So I don't think there's a specific hard response to this is what moving faster looks like. But I have no doubt that there's an appetite to move at scale quickly to deliver that transformation. So panelists, I'm going to give you a few minutes. We are now officially over time, but just a few minutes to reflect on the conversation that we've had. We've been hanging out. It's been fun. It's been robust. It's been really challenging at times, but I think that's in the spirit of engaging. So I've certainly enjoyed it. I think the panelists at times felt the heat in the collar, but that's fine. And I think that's in the spirit of being here in Sharm el Sheikh, to have these conversations that are at times uncomfortable. And I think we need to have that in big food, big impact, and putting ourselves at the forefront of getting, that feedback. Nada,
Yes.
reflections.
Should businesses do more? This is your question.
The conversation that we've had. So big food, big impact.
I oh, should businesses do more? Yes, they should. Should we act fast? Yes, we should. This is no game. We're very transparent. All the truth is on the table. Climate change is real. Plastic is real. And when it comes to plastic, you're done producing plastic. You need to find innovative solutions. When it comes to packaging, you need to be very innovative in your value chain. So yes, there is no time. We need to act now. We're done with the implementation phase. Now it's climate action.
So rightly said, Nada, and I believe as well we need to work together. There's always more to do. No one has all the answers. That's why we need to work together to find answers to the questions that we still don't have the answers to. We need to work together, and let's all do this together.
I get to bring it home. All right.
I get to bring it home.
Almost. No, there's definitely a lot that can still be said, especially about food waste. I did my college thesis on that, so would love to talk later about that. And I think kind of to wrap up, I think, a couple of things. One is that there's a lot of companies all around the world who are big companies, who are brands that are all producing the same types of products, right? So how are you transferring technology, transferring resources and ideas to other companies, and being transparent in that way too, I think is really, really helpful, and not being so worried about, are they going to, take this technology and patent it as their own. I think that sustainability challenges us to move beyond that to a more ideals of sharing, to make sure that when we are being able to push forward and be more ambitious, that everyone is able to be brought along the way at that time. And I think ultimately for me, there's a couple of other things, is that sustainability ultimately means less. It means people and land over profit. It means less plastic. It doesn't just mean being more efficient in how much plastic we're using. It means none. It means no more reliance on fossil fuels. It means no subsidies for fossil fuels and monocultures and all of these things. It means none of that. It means community first. And I think that we can't get rid of big business. I think that's an unfair statement to say. But I think that we should be pushing them to do more and learning from local communities, small businesses that have already found ways to get rid of plastic, to be one with the land, to be connecting with foods. And I think that ultimately, if we can look back deeply into the intentions behind why we have big business, or behind why farmers, some are concerned with money, some are concerned with land, what are the intentions behind every single person's actions, I think that we can start to get more at the root causes of things and really lead with action and collaboration that is centered on people and land, and not centered on profit and the bottom line and all of those other types of things. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for hanging with us. It's been really great to kick off day 3 of the Extreme Hangout in this wonderful setting. Much to reflect on. I think some key nuggets from this conversation and hanging out. Collaboration certainly being key. Couldn't agree more. I think that was a common theme that came through: collaboration and partnership. In order to solve these big challenges, we have to collaborate, we have to work together, and all the different players and food systems need to get together and listen. I think that's what you were saying. Listen to each other, listen such that we can transform not just big business, but every single player in the system playing their role, making their contribution, which is equally important. But the responsibility and the accountability that we demand of big food, I think, is warranted. I think people expect that of big food. And I think the responsibility certainly big food is taking and saying, we want to do more. We want to move faster. We want to definitely accelerate. So we're all, I think, kind of saying the same thing, though it's debatable. But I think the spirit of collaboration is certainly there. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And let's have a cup of coffee.